The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Technology. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. And joining me today on the panel are Father Joseph Sund. Hi, Father Joseph.
Happy 30th birthday to Windows 3.1.
Yay, let's blow out the candles. And Victor Lambs. Hey, Victor.
Hey, Dom.
Folks, I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you are sure to enjoy, one that Victor is on. It's called The Secrets of Stargate. That's right, The Secrets of Stargate, where you travel throughout the galaxy, having fun, cracking jokes in a distinctly 1990s style. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Stargate. So let's talk about today's show. The PC Magazine had an article recently, the biggest software flops of all time. And this is sort of, fun article where you get to relive all of the pain that you suffered having to endure these flops when they were on your actual computer, but being able to look back and go, oh man, those are the bad days. Secure in the notion that those things are long gone. And so we got to thinking that how about we do a list of our biggest tech flops of all time that we think about, both hardware and software. I want to sort of lay a little bit of a ground rule of like, what do we mean by a flop? It's not that it was that you disliked it. That doesn't make something a flop. It means it failed as a product. It launched or didn't maybe, or it was promised and never came about, or they big promises, not much delivery, or it came out and it just failed against its competitors or failed in the marketplace. Something along those lines. Or it was, if it was software, it was full of bugs and just never got anywhere. Products that probably, might not have, maybe shouldn't have ever seen the light of day. Products that make you go, what were you thinking? Or products you're like, wow, this is going to be great. And then it comes out and for some reason, it just doesn't catch fire. Maybe it was too early. The technology wasn't quite there for the idea. And if it had come in another time, it would have been more successful. Or there was just a competitor that just beat them. Maybe they didn't have a better product, but better marketing or better mind share or whatever, and this product flopped. So we're going to kind of have a little fun with it and talk about some of our favorites, you might say, from this. And so let's start talking about maybe some hardware. Victor, what would you pick as your first big tech flop of all time?
Yeah, so most of the, hardware, technology purchases I made have been, video game consoles. And so there's a number of those that haven't lived up to expectations. The Nintendo Virtual Boy, which was supposed to be the big follow-up to the Game Boy, kind of stands out as one. It was a case of, Nintendo being sold on a technology, which was this, portable, 3D stereoscopic screen. Unfortunately, it could only do like 4 shades of red in colors, and it had to be worn as goggles. Nintendo was concerned that if people were playing with this in the car, and there was an accident, these goggles could cause injuries, so they had to make it on a table mounted display, which limited, had to kind of like sit at the edge of a table with your face up against this display to play the games. So not it, kind of a cool technology that unfortunately, didn't translate into a very good consumer product. And I think you find that a lot with these, technology flops, is that, the people who created it had really good ideas, really good intentions, but, by the time it had to make it through, their office of general counsel and the lawyers and the marketing people, at some point with, I think all of these, we'll see that, this really good, germ of an idea kind of when it finally came out the other end, didn't look so pretty.
Again, I think it's one of those things that was ahead of its time a little bit, in the sense of the technology to do virtual reality just wasn't there in the mid 90s. It was, you could see the germ of the Oculus and the the other headsets that are out there now. But yeah, it was exciting in concept, but not in execution.
Yeah, and there are some very good on the web. You can find some very good oral histories of the Virtual Boy and kind of read more. If you have a couple of hours to read through these articles of kind of where it went off the rails. And I think we'll probably see that with a lot of these flops too. Is that there are probably some interesting stories to tell behind all of them.
Right. Father, what's your first hardware pick?
My first hardware pick is one that was so bad that at one point I saw it come up on eBay, and I think I paid about $20 for a product that once was a few $100s on eBay. And it was the compact PC companion C140. And this thing, basically, I think anything that was handheld that ran Windows CE could probably make our list.
Right.
Windows CE was, the nice way to put it was ahead of its time. They were trying to do a full-fledged computer without doing a full-fledged computer. The version of Office it ran would save its Word and Excel documents in a format that you couldn't actually open on the regular Word and Excel without another special piece of software in between it. And then, Victor would get this playing Game Boy a lot,
Yeah.
Imagine trying to type on a screen that you get that nighttime Game Boy problem on the original Game Boy, right? So there's one LED that you can turn on in the back of it to try to make up for it. Doesn't do much.
So let's describe what it looks like. It looks like a little laptop. It's a little clamshell device. You flip it open, and it's got the old green LCD screen, and it's got a tiny little chiclet keyboard. It had a stylus, right? I think it had a stylus.
It did have a stylus, yes.
But I'm guessing it was not a very good experience of writing on the screen.
Oh, no.
And like you said, there's a backlight, but the backlight you said was the kind where the light is at the bottom and shines up.
Yeah, it seems like it's just a single, like they might have put a couple diode LEDs in there and just shine them up.
Which is still more than the original Game Boy Advance had, and that was a very popular system. But
the worst feature of it is the keyboard.
Yeah,
the keyboard leaves a lot to be desired. And remember, the touchscreen at that time is still the membrane touchscreens.
Right, not responsive. Yeah,
I mean, it's easy to knock like Windows CE now, but it's kind of, if there was no Windows CE, would we really have kind of like the smart device revolution that we're seeing? Because it was kind of the first mainstream jump into embedded computing. I mean, they even put Windows CE on the Sega Dreamcast. Not very many games used it, but it was Windows' attempt to like, this is going to be, the version of Windows that's running on, washing machines and, sprinkler systems, industrial control systems, and even, third tier, like, would you call it not even a netbook, more of just like a,
right.
like those old Casio devices that could, keep track of your contacts or something back in the 80s.
Well, and then the one thing that I'll praise of it, it has a full-size PCMCIA card, which if you remember your old computers, that you'd have that PC expansion card you'd be able to add in. So this was back if you wanted to add a 56K modem to something, or a LAN connector, or this one I don't think got
56K. What are we, Rockefellers here? No, we can't afford 56K dial-up. No, we're selling that 28.8.
So and then what I had used it for is I used it for an expansion card that I was able to put a CF card in it, right? To put a compact flash and expand the memory to a whole whopping 16 megabytes.
Wow. But like you say, Victor, without Microsoft CE and the compact C140, we might not have had the Palm Pilot, today, because it was the contrast to it. And that really was the predecessor. I mean, you really could trace the smartphone as we know it today almost to the Palm Pilot in that sense, because it has the same general form factor and all that. So, and that's an interesting thing about these flops is they often are the flop that is followed by a success. You can almost connect it to something that succeeded later. So, so that's a good one. Let's see, maybe I'll mention my first one here, which kind of fits the same bill, and that would be the Apple Lisa. This was a computer that Apple came out with in between the Apple II and the Mac, and this was going to be its desktop computer for business. This is a serious machine. The Apple II was for schools and families. It was used in some businesses, but this was a machine built to be a business machine, and it wasn't cheap. It was $10,000 when it came out in 1983, which in 2020 dollars, after government caused inflation, as Jimmy Aiken likes to say, it would be like $25,000 today to buy this computer. Like, you think Mac Studios and Mac Pros are expensive, and but it didn't work well. The operating system, which was a graphical user interface, it was the first one before the Mac. It was sluggish. The programs didn't work very well. It just was a flop right out of the gate. And in fact, this was the project that got Steve Jobs thrown out of his own company by the board of directors. This is the one. I mean, the Mac was really his baby, but he was already going out the door. But by the time the Mac came out, I remember there's a story that, and I don't know if it's true or not, that there's like a landfill in Utah filled with Apple Lisas that they'd buried to just get rid of them because they couldn't sell them. Or maybe that's the right next to the video game that they buried too. What was the video game? That was
the E.T. game, I think.
Okay. There were coming attractions.
Yeah.
Coming attraction, yeah.
Well, yeah, the Lisa was a flop, and all I can say is that's probably why Xerox PARC Laboratories didn't bring it out themselves, and instead let Trip Hawkins and Steve Jobs blatantly copy everything. Yeah. And actually, there's a really good historian of early computers and computer games called the Digital Antiquarian, and he's done a very good kind of history of the Lisa, so we can put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, let's throw that link in there. That should be good.
I wonder how much those are running on eBay now. More or less than its original price.
Well, they only sold 10,000. Well, I'm going to guess less than the original price. Less than even the 9,000 something original price. It's my guess. But they only sold 10,000 in 2 years, which is not very many, even by the standards of the day. So, that certainly qualifies as a flop. All right, so we come back around. Victor, do you want to pick a software flop that you want to fondly remember?
Yeah, so I think I've blocked out most of the bad software that I've used and only remember the highlights. I do music production, so there's a lot of really bad music software and hardware that I've used over the years. But I had a bad experience actually with iOS version 11 dot something or other, where it tended to drain my battery very quickly and turn my Apple iPhone into a portable pocket heater, to the point where I got very concerned about it. And this was right around the time, to be fair, that Samsung, I think, was having the problems with their Galaxy S8s kind of turning into incendiary devices. So it was at that point I moved to Android, probably about 6 years ago. So that one stands out because it's the first time I've ever kind of rage quit. Is when you're playing a game and losing and you get upset, you kind of just turn off the game or
throw the controller down.
And that's where I kind of threw my iPhone down and switched to Android. So that one stands out in my mind as one that had kind of a material effect on, I'm changing, ecosystems here. So, but yeah, I mean, there's bad software, and that's why, you never you never invest too heavily into software because not so much that software is bad, but a lot of the software I use is very small development teams.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always a question of, will these people be in business, 6 months or 6 years from now? So,
right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's probably other things, but that one stands out.
How about you, Father? What's your pick for a bad bit of software?
My bad software pick, I think, is probably the poster boy of bad software. And it begins with the naming of it. It was called Microsoft Bob. And Microsoft Bob was a cartoon interface that was designed to make Windows 3.1 the greatest operating system that Microsoft ever made, to make that more usable. So this was a predecessor to Windows 95.
Okay.
And it was a cartoon interface. It was kind of like a living room that you set up. And in a cartoon way, they had icons sitting around that you would click on to open things. So you'd have your address book sitting on a table. You'd have your calendar up on the wall that you'd click on to open your calendar, a to-do list, all those little things. And then you had a little dog that was your friend, and he was your virtual assistant. And if we want to talk about things that would have never been possible without these flops, our great friend Clippy on Microsoft Word
infamous
in Office would have never been possible without Microsoft Bob. And so we can thank this flop and this fail for Clippy.
Although you can point to the fact that like kids today don't know how to write a letter or a resume. No Clippy. Clippy informed an entire generation on how to write letters and whether
I see that you're trying to write a letter here. Do you need some help?
That's good. That's good.
Thanks, Clippy. No, I mean, Microsoft Bob is an interesting case. It's like most of these flops, very much of its time. You mentioned 1995, the game Myst in 1993 had brought a whole new, audience to computers. CD-ROMs were popping up. People bought computers because they thought they were going to be multimedia devices. They didn't know DOS. They wanted, I guess it's a skeuomorphic, type interface where, a calendar looks like a calendar, an address book looks like an address book. And you can kind of see how at various times we've come back to this too, where, in virtual reality, I don't know if it's this way today, but like you look at like your Rolodex or whatever, and that's your contacts list or something. But yeah, very much of its time, probably a really good idea, but anybody who would have used a Microsoft product probably didn't have time for it.
Well, remember the original iOS, that's what made it so great, right? You had the notepad that looked like a notepad on that original iPhone. The last thing that came out of this that we can't forget, the font Comic Sans was created for Microsoft Bob.
Microsoft Bob has a lot to answer for. Let's just say that.
Don't blame the font for how it gets used. That's all I could say. Because a generation of public school teachers and church secretaries found it on their computer and thought, "Oh, that looks fun."
Yeah. It's hip with the kids. So let me talk about one. So the mid 90s was a tough time for Apple. Let's just say that until 1997. We had the aborted attempt to create a whole new operating system. Apple Copeland was the one. It was just, they just worked and worked and worked. They could never get anywhere with it. And that could qualify as one of the flops. But I'm going to go with something that's semi-related, which was OpenDoc. And this was a concept that Apple came up with for modular software, so that it was always, I think part of the problem with it was always tough to explain. Like, I want a word processor. What do I like? It was a document instead of working within, like, from software application to software application, going from Word to Excel to PowerPoint. the idea was people work on projects. I have this report I have to do. So it was a document focused idea. And so you'd open a document and you would put in a word processing module, and then you'd put in an Excel module. And in fact, that's a lot like how I work from Apple works today. If I have a Pages document open, I can drop a spreadsheet into it from Numbers. So it was there in concept, but it just, again, ahead of its time. It didn't work. It was slow. It was buggy. Although there was the browser that they offered called CyberDog, and I liked CyberDog. It was a decent browser. It wasn't the best, but we didn't have much to work with back then. We had Internet Explorer and Netscape, and I think that was
about it.
That was about it. And yeah.
Did they have a little cartoon dog that would say, "It looks like you're trying to write a letter"?
No,
because that I think would have made it. Yeah,
Gruff, you're trying to surf the web. It was McGruff. The
users are losers, kid. Yeah.
No, that would have made it even better. But it was a flop. But I wish it wasn't. And in fact, in the long run, it wasn't, because that's how we work today. Like, I love the idea of contextual computing. My computer should work around the context of what I'm trying to do. So when I'm recording a podcast, only stuff that's related to the podcast should be visible and up, and that's how it should be focused around. And so the idea was there, they just couldn't implement it. And that, again, that's a lot of software and hardware at the time.
Yeah, I was going to say this sounds a lot like Office 365 today, but it really isn't. I mean, even today in Office 365, if you try to grab an Excel thing and put it into a PowerPoint or something, which is something I do a lot of, it's still very clunky, and you can tell that it's not one sort of base code with different front ends on it.
iWork is pretty seamless. I mean, it is pretty awesome. If you want to, if you've created a numbers spreadsheet and you want to just throw it in a Keynote, it works like nothing. It's so good, but it's just not widely used, and that's numbers is nowhere near as powerful as Excel. I mean, just it's getting there, but it's nowhere near that. I use numbers for a lot of things in Pages, but there's a lot of stuff where I just use Excel because it's got the tool set. So let's move on to our next hardware picks. Victor, what do you have next for hardware?
So I'm going to have to defer to our Discord server on this, SQPN's new Discord server, where we're having a lot of really good conversations there. And there was a recommendation from the crowd there. Johnny Osprey, I think, mentioned it. The Atari Jaguar, another video game system, and has the distinction of being the only video game system that I ever actually sold a few years after I purchased it. It was billed as a 64-bit video game system, I think, because probably it had 4 16-bit processors in it or something like that, or a 32-bit, some weird math. But it had a very weird, going way back to the 70s, the Intellivision had a controller with, numerous 16, 8, 24 buttons on it. And then these little membranes that you would put over the, little plastic sheets that you would put over the controller that had, game specific controls printed on them. And the Atari Jaguar was kind of like that. But again, Atari, since, its heyday in the late 70s, early 80s, has kind of, gone through receivership. It's been owned by various companies, first Warner Brothers, and Jack Tramiel, bought them out. And so, questionable hardware has come out under that name for a good long time now. And it's just, the games weren't there. The controllers, the hardware was very clunky, and expensive too. So that I think I sold, and, bought a questionable piece of, probably music making hardware with the money at the time, but which I probably have also since sold, but no regrets about selling the Jaguar, unfortunately. So very good recommendation from the Discord server group there.
Well, you can say that you once owned a Jaguar.
Yeah, and I never will again. No desire to hunt one up on eBay or anything like that. Nope.
Yeah, nice. How about you, Father? What's your next hardware pick?
My next hardware pick was something that I bought as a high schooler, being poor and not being able to afford the real iPod that came out. I think that would have been about my junior year of high school when that. And this was the iPod Shuffle. And it was available in a 512 megabyte and a 1 gigabyte format. And if you remember, you had the commercials that you had the silhouette guy dancing around, and he had it the shuffle hanging around his neck on the lanyard that it came with. And so that was a neat part of it. And all in all, it was basically USB thumb drive turned in an MP3 player, and the device itself was fairly well built. After a lot of use, that USB header would come loose and break. But the part that flopped is originally you cannot play the AIFF file format, which just so happened to be what every iTunes music was encoded with. And so it had to convert all your files to put it onto this iPod Shuffle, if I remember right.
So there was some of the music that Apple sold, or the stuff that Apple iTunes sold was lossless in AIFF. But if you had MP3s, you could just throw them on there, so I remember.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you had purchased music on iTunes, it had to convert your purchased music to get it onto the iPod Shuffle, which nowadays would be pretty easy. But when you had slower computers, it
took a long time.
If I have a gigabyte of music I'm putting on there, it could be a couple hour process sometimes when you're running a 300 megahertz computer.
Yep.
And this was the one without a screen. I think they were selling these up until about 4 years ago, right? I mean,
in various forms.
In various forms.
Nanos or...
In various forms. This was the one that was no screen, and by its name, it would just shuffle your music. So you had no clue what was going to come up.
Oh, wow.
Well, you could play in order. You could put it on in order and have it play in order. But yeah, it was designed to just kind of you put a playlist on there and it shuffles. It's like having in some ways, it was the modern incarnation of the mixtape. Just a tape of random music.
I was going to say this in your previous pick, which is that little keyboard that all you can do is basically like pound out text files on. Like, this sounds like a hipster's dream, right? I mean, if you're going to write like a novel or screenplay, something that can only type, and then if you're going to listen to music, something where it's completely random, and it's just limited to whatever you put on there.
Right.
Get me an old Nokia phone and I'm in heaven, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, I think there's a real, someone needs to bring these things back, right? I mean.
So for my next pick, I'm going to pick something that might be a little, some people are going to say it's not a flop because you see them everywhere, but I'm going to call it a flop for a specific reason. And that's the Segway. Now, like I said, you see Segways everywhere. Anytime you go to a city, you see tourists, touring around the city in a little, gaggle of Segways, like a bunch of like long neck geese with wheels. And the reason I call it a flop is because this was the most overhyped product I think I'd ever seen. When they were introducing this, you had people, not just the people selling the Segway, you had people like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak and all these big tech guys. It's going to change everything. Society itself will be unlike it ever was. It will change how cities work. I mean, this was like, you would think that we had just replaced the internal combustion engine with a $10 scooter. Like, I mean, it was like and it would be just as good. Like, when I look at them, I'm thinking, were they really that diluted, or were they bought off, or why was it so hyped for so little return? Like, I love the fact that it's a self-balancing platform that you can ride around on and stuff, but it's essentially a motorized scooter. What do you guys think?
I mean, Dean Kamen is a heck of a pitchman, and I'm glad that he took some of that Segway money and, started First Robotics with it.
Yeah.
which is a very good robotics competition. But no, I mean, it gets into the whole like question of urban mobility, and Paul Blart Mall Cop jokes aside, the first one at least is a good movie. The the technology from the Segway I think is still being used today in self-balancing and bird scooters I think use some aspect of it. So the pandemic, which kind of locked down cities, put a crimp in that whole kind of urban mobility movement, which was pushing internal combustion engine, especially cars, out of urban centers, having more personal mobility through electric scooters, that sort of thing. That dream may still yet come to fruition. And I think Segway had a very integral part. Didn't like a scooter kill like one of the guys who invented it though, or something, like drove him off a cliff or something?
I don't know that one. Yeah. No, I mean,
it sounds like so
poetic injustice.
Now this leads way to the I think on the Segway flop, I think you could also add your what were those called? Those hoverboards that set on fire.
Oh yeah, hoverboards. Yeah, those are also.
I don't think that showed up on our list, but that could that definitely qualifies as a flop.
So Victor, what you were referring to was the guy who bought Segway from Dean Kamen in 2009, the British businessman Jimmy Heselden. A year later. Yeah. In an ironic and unfortunate accident, as Wikipedia says, Heselden died after he plunged into the River Wharfe while riding a rugged country version of Segway. I mean, oh my gosh, talk about
that. Yeah, that river is the son of the River Moog, right? So, but no, yeah, tragic. But I mean, a lot of these flops, it's like Einstein said, if I can see further than, or Newton said, if I can see further than other men, it's because I've stood on the shoulder of giants, right?
Right.
In this case, any successful product stands on the shoulder of these, failed, not giants, but, products.
And that's the thing is there's so many of these, they're still out there. Like they're used by police. They're used, they're not just used by tourists, but they're used in all kinds of ways. And there are all kinds of versions of it now. And I know, and they're used in a lot of businesses. So it's hard to say it's a flop. I mean, it's an ongoing concern making a profit, but it was in relation to the original hyped projection of its impact. And I think that's another important way that something could flop is it could still be a commercial success. But if it was so overhyped to begin with and it never lived up to that promise, I think that still qualifies in some ways as a flop.
Mm-hmm.
Like Ghostbusters 2.
Yes.
Decent enough movie, but not up to the
Ghostbusters 1.
Yeah.
All right. So let me just mention a couple other of my honorable mentions. You can't talk about hardware flops without talking about Betamax. There were two cassette formats, videotape formats back in the late 70s, early 80s, VHS and Betamax. Betamax was arguably the superior technology, and VHS ate its lunch. And that's a tale we get told over and over again. The better stuff does not always win. There are lots of factors. Same thing with the Replay TV DVR. Back in the late 90s, there were two TiVo-like products. TiVo is now a generic name, but they're technically called DVRs. There were two DVRs out there, the Replay TV and the TiVo, and I was torn. I really wanted a Replay TV, couldn't get one. They were too expensive. I went and got a Sony TiVo, and I loved that thing. It was like back in the days before streaming. This was how you time shifted, your TV watching, and it saved my sanity after 9/11 in one sense, because I had something like 15 hours of Simpsons episodes saved up on it. And after like 2 straight weeks of the news just about the bombing, I needed to take a break, and I watched hours of Simpsons laughing my gut sore, and I always remember that fondly. But the Replay TV,
that was before FXX was a station, because nowadays you could watch 15 hours of Simpsons just turning that station on.
Well, right, but at the time, everything was nonstop wall-to-wall news, even the non-news stations. It was wild. But the Replay TV, it tried different things. It went to DirecTV. It just never took off. And TiVo became like I said, a generic term. I TiVo'd that,
Yeah.
How do you compete?
Yeah, it all comes down to the user experience with a lot of these products. Is you can have the technologically, the best quote unquote product, but if the user experience isn't there and somebody else has cracked that, like TiVo did, they'll eat your lunch every time.
Right. Or getting the mind share, like getting a term into use that is just like you TiVo the thing. No one said I replay TV today. It just became a thing. Another product that flopped on the market, the Microsoft Zune, another one that's a famous hardware flop, which is had a funny cameo in Guardians of the Galaxy Part 2 at the end there as this great new product from Earth with all the music on it.
Sadly, the software on it, though, was...
It was amazing software, but
it was probably better than the Windows Phone software.
Yeah.
You can't out DRM Apple when it comes to digital rights management. You can't, if you want to create your own walled garden, you can't create walls that are higher than the ones Apple puts around their own products. So
right.
It's open or nothing.
We're running a bit long on this segment. I want to kind of wrap things up. Any other things you want to mention? Like I just have a couple left. I want to mention honorable mention to Google Wave, which was going to be another, this is the future of computing. It turned out to be the predecessor to Google Docs, basically. It was a kind of Google Docs. Everyone wanted to get in on the beta. It was really hotly sought after. People were paying money for beta invites. I remember that. But it eventually collapsed and then reemerged later as Google Docs and Google Sheets. So that was one. And then another amusing one from Apple, iTunes Ping. That was its music-focused social network that just was, I don't know what they were thinking because they introduced it, had no features, and it went nowhere. Like there was no reason to use it ever. So those are the ones I wanted to just mention. How about Father? How about you list off any others that you had?
Okay,
there?
my top honorable mention is Shaq Fu by Electronic Arts, and I do own Shaq Fu. This is Mortal Kombat with Shaq.
Shaquille O'Neal.
With Shaquille O'Neal. So you can throw basketballs at Charles Barkley. Again, a game ahead of its time. I think now if they made this game and you could play with Shaq and throw basketballs at Charles Barkley, is it remade?
They have remade it, I believe, yes. Let me look this up, but I think Shaq Fu 2...
I have hours of entertainment in front of me.
A Legend Reborn. Yes, Shaq Fu 2, A Legend Reborn came out, I don't know how long ago, about 4 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a fighting game as envisioned by French people who are very passionate about animation and didn't really consider that in a fighting game you want like really tight controls. You can interrupt animations in order to, attack and block and stuff. And they were just like, no, we're so proud of our animation. If you make an attack move, we're going to show you the whole animation regardless of what it does to the gameplay. So different kind of fighting game.
Nice. What else, Father?
And then I'll throw my last couple in here just quickly. There was a predecessor to Google Pay that was called ISIS Pay. And the reason it flopped was not that it was bad software, just that I really don't want to make mobile payments on a piece of software named after a terrorist organization. And so that flopped because of that. And then lastly, we did tease this one, so we need to say it, was E.T. And this was for the Atari. They produced so many of these cartridges thinking the game was going to be a hit. I think it was like 5 million or something. And they all ended up in a landfill pretty much. I proudly do own a copy of that one as well. And lastly, if you want to see my other picks, you can see my post on Google+.
Yeah.
Oh, Google+. Well, we miss you. E.T. may be the most infamous game flop of all time. Misunderstood. Yeah.
Yeah. Howard Scott Warshaw, like Steven Spielberg had said, I want a video game about E.T. Came to Atari. Atari said, sure, we can get you a video game in 6 weeks. Gave it to Howard Scott Warshaw, who has since exited the game industry and become a therapist, I believe. Gave it his all, and in 6 weeks came out with the game, but the whole industry was already collapsing by the time 82, I think it was, that E.T. was coming out, and so it was a symptom definitely of a larger sickness in the in the crash, the great crash of 82, 83. So
right.
Yeah, misunderstood.
Yeah,
but no less awful as a game.
So, and then the last of the suggestions from the Discord were Windows 8, Windows Mobile, the Engage, and and you mentioned the Atari Jaguar as well.
Yeah.
They mentioned that as well.
The Nokia Engage, yes.
I think we want to mention, we were mentioning this before the show. Microsoft ends up there 8 times on our list.
Yeah, right.
But when you're as big as a company that's innovated as much as Microsoft, and you can say the same for Apple, you're going to fail, and your fails are going to be visible. Right. And they're going to be big.
Well, and there's some companies, their failures, they do it behind the doors before they release the product. And some companies like to get stuff out there, and they'll fail. They're okay with failing in the marketplace. It's just it's a philosophy. Apple prefers to fail behind closed doors. They don't always get to do that, I guess. Whereas companies like Google will try 100 things and throw 98 of them away. And that's just the way it is. All right, so we'd love to hear what you think are the biggest tech flops of all time. And you can let us know by sending your suggestions to technology@sqpn.com or join our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. So before we move on to some headlines, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Technology, including Dan S., Robert L., Dion R., Jonathan S., and Bill. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Technology and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So our first headline is from Bloomberg, which says robot truckers could replace 500,000 U.S. jobs, and it's so the story is that there's a lot of the trucking industry, the parts of the trucking industry that are long haul, very simple driving, on long highways, boring, straight interstate stretches, that sort of stuff. The really tricky part of driving is, besides staying awake on the long haul, is in the local, driving through cities, driving on city streets and that sort of stuff. And that there's this huge shortage of drivers. Now, my older brother, has been a truck driver for nigh on 40 years at this point. And he knows, and I've gone with him on the road, and he'll tell you there are a lot of guys out there who shouldn't be driving, who aren't very experienced, who aren't very conscientious about other people around them. According to this article, the American Trucking Association says the industry is short about 61,000 drivers. And the estimate is even if they just sent out truck drivers on long-haul gigs in good weather for part of the year, it's just in the optimal conditions, you could still save about 10% of human driving of trucks. So what do you guys think of this story? Would you feel safe on the road around robot trucks driven autonomously?
I don't feel safe around robot-driven Teslas. I don't want a semi coming at me driven by a robot right now.
Yeah.
And I'll just leave it there. I think it would meet our technology flop list that would be ahead of its time and too much.
What do you think, Victor?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really, really tricky one here. I think we could get to a point where the technology itself is reliable. The question is always going to be the human-driven vehicles that are interacting. Today truck drivers have to deal with, the cars that zip in front of them and then slam on their brakes, and
right.
And you have to anticipate a lot of the reaction time out there. I just don't know who this helps exactly. I mean, supposedly we have a shortage of truckers, but it gets into a whole lot of like labor issues and things that I'm not really comfortable with, or really comfortable commenting on. Anything that could put a lot of people out of work, I think is probably not what we need right now. But at the same time, from a technology standpoint, I mean, it would be kind of cool. But if all we need is something that with very little human involvement transports a lot of freight down a straight line. We have that. It's called, it's railroads.
Right. Right.
Put the containers on a railroad and ship them via rail. It's a lot more efficient. Nothing's more efficient than a steel wheel on a steel rail. And
you can do that stuff by robot now.
Yeah. I mean, so why turn our highways into railroads when we have perfectly good railroads?
Right. And the article is a bit too rosy about something. I mean, they kind of contrast to say lobbyists are seeking to lower the minimum age for interstate drivers to 18 from 21. So you have a choice. It might be a robot or a teenager. I mean, 18 is not a teenager. Technically, it is. 18 is an adult.
Yeah. If you can go to Afghanistan and fight in a war, I mean, you can drive a truck.
18 doesn't mean you're irresponsible. So there was a little of that. I didn't see where they got this 500. The study says that they could replace about 90% of human driving in U.S. long haul trucking, the equivalent of roughly 500,000 jobs. But that's really out there. That's really pie in the sky. I mean, they're talking realistically maybe 10%. So maybe 50,000 of those 61,000 jobs. Maybe. But I agree with you that the idea of we need to get better at autonomous driving cars before we have autonomous driving 80,000-pound vehicles. The one thing I like though is the idea that a truck with an autonomous system in it could have sensors all around it, so that the trucks would not have the blind spots that human drivers have now. I mean, there are massive blind spots around a truck. People, when you drive around trucks, folks, give it a huge wide berth. I mean, he cannot see you as well as you think he can. I've heard too many stories about bad things happening with that. Our next headline is from Vice.com. Meet the secretive U.S. company building an unbreakable internet inside Russia. Now, the gimmick here is it's not that Russia is building a secret internet. They're building a peer-to-peer network based on these apps that they're designing that the Russian government can't break. So Russia, in the wake of the Ukraine invasion, has been locking down its network. It's throwing up what some people call the digital Iron Curtain, kind of like China's digital red wall. And they people can't access the social media. They can't speak freely in public online. And so there are these apps that are going up in Russia that are peer-to-peer and secure and encrypted and anonymizing, so that people can exchange information and organize, and they won't get found out and that sort of thing. And it's not dependent on the infrastructure allowing it. It works despite that infrastructure. What do you guys think of this? Does it seem like a realistic thing?
I say, great. Now do the United States. Give us this in the United States, where we're not being monitored, at every turn by the federal government. No, I mean, you have to look at who's paying for this. And at least one source of funding that they noted in here is the Open Technology Fund, which is sponsored by the U.S. State Department. So is this a, CIA, initiative? Is this something that's funded by, the U.S. government to prompt, stability or regime change abroad or something? Maybe. I think it's a good idea, though. I think we need one here.
I think you can actually install it here. I mean, it's not country dependent. So they said they have millions of users around the world, and they've got apps for Windows, Android, iOS, Mac, and Ubuntu. And they say that there's no logging, no cooperation with law enforcement. It's end-to-end encrypted with multiple third-party white box audits, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, there's nothing that says you couldn't use it here.
Question, if there's a Linux app, it brings my question to it that something like this, I would want to see it. Is it open source?
Right.
Am I able to see the source code of it? Am I able to see what's underneath the hood?
Right.
Especially when we're talking about privacy and monitoring and creating an open network. That'd be something that would be good if it is. I don't know the background on that.
I would guess not open source. This company looks very much either not for profit, but has heavily funded by private interests.
Well, then if you're, and this shows my bias, but if you're hiding your source code, what are you hiding underneath your source code? And so I'm a little untrustworthy if.
Yeah. Well, one of the things they say is that that it does is it's a software application that delivers private, fast, reliable, and secure access to blocked websites and apps. So it's kind of like a VPN, you know. It doesn't exactly explain what it's doing.
It's kind of like using a VPN on a peer's machine or something. Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
So
it's
like
a peer-to-peer VPN, basically.
Kind of a BitTorrent-based VPN, kind of. I mean, that's
yeah. There's a free version and a pro version. The pro version gives you more data and more better speed and that sort of thing. And it's $32 for a year. So
and they have their own cryptocurrency. So if you want to buy into that multi-level marketing scheme, you can do that as well.
But on the other hand, anything we could do to break the government, any government's ability to suppress in communication and information, I think it's a good thing. I mean, we got Signal and that's Signal. Telegram, though, I recall one of those two, which is it, Signal or Telegram, that actually cooperates with the Russian government's requirements on some disclosures, which makes it less suitable for the purpose.
I don't know, so I'm not going to comment. I don't want to throw a company under the bus.
Right. I know.
Yeah, exactly.
You could Google it, and you'll find out pretty quickly. There is another app out there that's similar called Lockdown. It's another encrypted messaging app. It's from the guy who does Smarter Every Day, the YouTube channel. He's part of the project, and they've been developing it over the last year or so. And I think they're intending it to be open source and an open project, but also encrypted. So something to check out.
I just write my messages on paper and leave them under a rock in the park.
There you go.
There you go. I'm old school.
I spray print my tweets on the underpasses.
There you go.
So let's talk about our last headline, which might be the biggest one of the week. The biggest tech news of the week is Elon Musk bought 10% of Twitter and got appointed to the board of directors after being one of its biggest critics lately. And so I find this very interesting. So Elon Musk is an interesting figure regardless. And he's been having trouble. Let's say he has trouble with Twitter's censorship, its rules, how it shuts down conversation about certain topics.
Double standards.
Double standards.
Yeah. Arbitrary standards might be the
that's another one. So he took a 10%, 9.2% stake in the company, which shocked a lot of people.
That's a lot.
That is a big chunk.
$3 billion.
Yeah, and which is, I mean, even for him, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then he got. I love how the CEO put it. It became clear to us that he would bring great value to the board, and that's why we appointed him. Yeah, I'm not sure you had much choice at that point.
And that's why I'm going to be looking for another job in about a week or two here. Yeah, right. In general, I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of the world having a world's richest man. But if we have to have a world's richest man, I'm so glad it's Elon Musk. He's like the Scrooge McDuck of like reality. He's like, oh, you want to fly a rocket to the moon? Yeah, we can do that. You want to look for the lost city of Atlantis? Sure. We have, we can burrow into the ground and do that. Or, even this, it's like, gosh, I really don't like how this platform is suppressing free speech. I'm gonna invest and change it. And very interesting. I don't know if our listeners are familiar with the Babylon Bee, but apparently before he made this move, he reached out to Seth Dillon, who's the CEO of Babylon Bee, and also I think a millionaire or billionaire in his own right, who made some money in the tech industry, and said, "Is it true that you were banned for this particular tweet and are still suspended and you can't use your account?" And he said, "Oh yeah, that's true." And he's like, okay, I might just like buy the company or something, And so he went off, and it's interesting to think that like Twitter's kind of petty and pointless suspension, in my opinion, of the Babylon Bee may have prompted to some small degree Elon Musk making this move, which is going to upset their apple cart. But I mean, Twitter, people who live on Twitter don't really appreciate that Twitter is a very small bubble in terms of the rest of the world. But what Twitter does do is it kind of creates that public opinion that the news media amplifies and regurgitates over and over and over again. So anything we could do to increase the number of voices on there that are actually heard and not shut down. I mean, there's major news stories that the New York Times, Washington Post now are coming out and saying are true regarding a certain laptop that Twitter suspended, a newspaper for sharing that, 18 months ago, and forbid users like myself from sharing links to that story, and even pushed us off the platform. So I'm excited to be coming back to Twitter at some point if these reforms and stuff are implemented.
I do love the fact that Elon Musk seems to be the sort of guy who says, there needs to be this in the world, and then goes and does it. There needs to be affordable, practical electrical vehicles. Okay. There needs to be a private company that's carrying stuff into space instead of NASA and is eventually going to go to the moon, into Mars. Okay. I mean, there needs to be a civilian flamethrower on the market. Okay. I mean, it's like,
yeah,
why not? He just goes out and does it. And I love that attitude.
It's a virtue, right? Of something needs to happen. I'm going to do it. Right. And I think sometimes we haven't seen that enough in the church. We hear a lot of critics saying the church needs to be doing this. The church needs to be doing that. Buddy, you are the church. Go out and do it.
Right. You're part of it. So, I'm the inevitable response that we might get from some listeners is, oh, but Elon Musk has said this or said that. That's problematic. And do not consider this an unabashed endorsement of everything Elon Musk has ever said or done.
No.
He's got plenty of problematic views, of course, but let's get, in the current environment, that's supposed to be a disqualifier. It's not. We all have disagreements, but for many of us, there's more areas where we can agree and work together despite our disagreements. And that's what I want to applaud here is let's get together despite whatever, even very important disagreements we have over very fundamental things, but there are things we can agree on and we can get stuff done. We need to work with people we disagree with in order to accomplish things. And I think that's one of the things that Elon Musk is showing here by, joining the Twitter board of directors and taking a partial ownership stake in the company.
Yeah, I mean, the Lord works in mysterious ways. He can use anything or anyone for his own purpose. And so here you have a South African, businessman, created PayPal, now is sending rockets into space, wants to go to Mars in the next couple of years, has a beef with Twitter. So just gets a seat on the board. Right. All this, this can all be worked for good, I think. So it's, just sit back and enjoy the ride, I guess.
Yep. Excellent. So those are our headlines this week. Let's move on to our picks of the week. Father Joseph, you're up first. What is your pick this week?
Well, my pick this week is put out by the Pine 64 organization, which is the same company that has the Linux-based smartphone. But this is a little bit different. It's called the Pinesol. And what it is it's a soldering iron. And the Pinesol soldering iron here is a smart soldering iron, basically. So it has a display on it. And with the display, you can adjust the temperature, adjust the voltage, do all this different smart stuff with it. It's an open firmware. So if you want to edit the firmware of it, you can, I guess. I don't know what I would do with it. I don't know what I would do with it. But as I've been using it, one of the useful features is when I lay the soldering iron down, it goes to sleep. It senses that I've laid it down and it stops heating the iron, which is just so neat. That I don't have to worry about burning down a house with my soldering iron and it's I think it was a $30 device or so.
Oh, wow. That's much cheaper. I have a smart soldering iron, I think it's a TS80P that, some Chinese, factory makes it.
$25.99.
$25.99. Much cheaper.
Wow.
And the couple projects I've done with it, though, the projects failed because of my 16-year lapse of soldering, not because of the gun. But the iron works really well. So I've been impressed with it for a $25 soldering gun, which, is about the same price as stuff you can pick up at Walmart or
just your
hardware store.
Yeah. And I like the idea that if I burn my fingers, I can blame the soldering iron now. Like, you're a smart device. You should have not burned my fingers.
It is also powered by either USB-C or you can put a regular DC socket in there. The DC socket obviously can help bring you a higher voltage in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the way to go, and it's got a nice thick grip to it too, which a lot of the other ones don't. So
great
if you have hamburger hands like I do. That's
and then it has the removable tips and all of that.
Very nice. Awesome.
I'm going to check that out. Thanks.
So Victor, what's your pick this week?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about technology flops this week, and there are two YouTube channels that I enjoy that kind of popped in my head about. They're both about taking underappreciated or, what people would think is bad technology and then kind of putting a new perspective on it. And the first is called Bad Gear. And Bad Gear is an Austrian musician who takes, as he says, the world's most hated audio gear, and then in fun short videos shows how he can use this gear to make some actual really cool music. So I would recommend that. It's a very fun channel, especially if you're interested in how music is produced. And then Technology Connections is if you want a deeper dive into these technologies, everything from we mentioned Betamax videotapes, compact fluorescent light bulbs. If you want to understand like how these technologies came about, what makes them so interesting, from a technological perspective, I can recommend that as well. A very engaging, well-written channel as well. So those two I can recommend.
He did an extended series on incandescent light bulbs, like the history of light bulbs and lights or lamps in general. It was awesome, deep dive. He also did one on washing machine, dishwasher technology, which changed the way I use my dishwasher. Like when you understand how the technology works, it changes your relationship to it and how you might use it to use it better. And so like now I use a different kind of cheaper detergent and use less of it. And yeah, it's a great channel. Technology Connections is awesome. So my pick this week is something I'd been looking for a while, and because I have a iPhone 13, my wife has an iPhone 12. They both use the MagSafe connector that Apple is putting in their new phones, and so you can magnetically connect it to a special MagSafe charger pad and charge your phone, and it won't move around and that sort of thing. And we'd had a couple different car mounts for our phones for years. One was spring-loaded, and you had to squeeze it, and you drop the phone in. It was like an X-shaped spring-loaded thing. The other car had a one where you had to squeeze these things on the side and open the arms up, and then you let go, and it only worked half the time. It was a pain in the neck. And in one of them, you had to still plug a cable in. The other one was actually a Qi charger in it, which was nice. But I said, I've been saying for a while, now that we got the MagSafe, I want to just go where I can slap the thing on there and just not worry about it. And well, finally, Anker has come out with its Anker PowerWave MagSafe car charging mount, and it's a nice little thing. It either mounts in the air vent, which I don't like, and frankly, it doesn't work on the air vents in my Honda anyway. But I just like the idea of hot air blowing onto the back of my phone all winter. I mean, in the summer when it's air conditioning, that would be great. That's actually a good thing. But you could tell this stuff was designed by people who live in California, and because it doesn't ever get cold there. So there's that. Or you could use the special 3M sticky mount for your dash, and that's what I've done in both our Honda and our van. And I did run into one little glitch, which is it only charges via USB-C. So you either need to have a USB-C charger, which is another added expense, which I ended up having to pay and get shipped from Amazon, or if you have a USB-C to USB-A cable of some sort, which are out there. It'll charge slower. It doesn't pass as much voltage, but it's out there. I decided to just get the USB-C chargers. I have a whole rant about the switch over from USB-A to USB-C ubiquity with charging cables and stuff like that, and how it's kind of a boondoggle in this transition because you never have enough USB-C cables or slots or anything anywhere anymore. But you also still need USB-A because some things are still USB-A. It's kind of a pain.
But you don't have to worry about you don't have to like flip it around 3 times, right? And it's always the third time with that USB-A cable.
USB-A. It's 1, turn it, 2, turn it back, and then it goes in every time. You have to you have to get into the next dimension in order to get it in there. It exists in 4 dimensions.
What's worse is the printer side of the cable. Remember those? Is it the B connector?
The B connectors, yes.
The B connectors, yeah.
Those take at least 6 tries to get in.
And then you have those really weird ones that they put on like hard drives and stuff.
Yep. And then there's the USB 3 flat ones, and then you have the micro and mini, which are not the same thing. Yeah. That's a whole nother rant. But anyway,
we can do a whole episode on USB.
You're right, on USB cables.
Yeah, there's your USB-B still in bag. Yeah.
Yep. So the Anker PowerWave MagSafe car charging mount is my pick, and then my supplementary one is the Anker also makes a USB-C car charger with 2 slots in it, which would be kind of handy in case you want to let your wife charge her phone while you're driving too. So CC. Anyway, that should do it for us this time. We'd love to hear what you think of our discussion, anything we had to say on our tech flops or on any of our headlines or our picks of the week. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/technology or the SQPN Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to technology@sqpn.com, or visit our StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord. And you'll find links from our discussion and our picks of the week in our show notes at sqpn.com. Remember to like each episode of Secrets of Tech on Facebook, on Twitter, retweet it there, leave us comments. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, Victor Lambs, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of technology.
Thanks, Tom.
Father Joseph Sun, thank you as well.
Thanks, and we'll see you guys on Discord.
That's right. And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.